Okay, hi everybody, and good evening here from the Temple of Silence. It's been a little while since I've been able to be with you, but we are beginning Rule 14. I think I've got to make a 14 there, don't I? X1X. Is that it, or is it? No, it's X. Right, X X1V. Sorry. So this is the beginning of Rule 14. We have another maybe 60, 70 pages to go in the book, A Treatise on White Magic. So this is our seventh program in the series that deals with rules for magic, the rules of magic for the physical plane, including the etheric plane, of course. And we've done now, let's see, 109 plus 6, so about 115 programs on this book, a wonderful book, a necessary book for all those who really want to know what discipleship is and live according to its tenets. All right, Rule 14, let's look at that. The sound swells out. The hour of danger to the soul courageous draweth near. The waters have not hurt the white Creator, and naught could drown nor drench him. Danger from fire and flame menaces now, and dimly yet the rising smoke is seen. Let him again, after the cycle of peace, call on the solar angel. Well, we're going to be bringing this aspirationally motivated thought form, a clear and clearly desired, powerfully desired thought form, into expression on the dense physical plane, having prepared its archetypal sponsor on the etheric plane. We're going to be studying here the centers and prana, the use of the hands, the treading of the way, and the awakening of the centers. So let's go into it. The centers and prana, these being our first consideration. The nearer we approach in our thought to the physical plane, the more difficulty is experienced by the magician. The energies are more material there. They're denser. Basically, they are more resistant to the manifestation of his highly motivated thought form. And the ancient fires get involved, and we'll see what this looks like. The more difficulty is experienced by the magician, whether he be the solar angel occupied with the magical work of manifestation, namely in creating a personality, or an expert worker under the plan. All the magical processes have this analogy that as you come closer to the final stage of manifestation, you are met by the most resistant of the fires, those which have been brought over from the previous solar system and which are not considered to be at this time principled. All right. Why is this? What is the cause? Why is it more difficult the closer we approach the physical plane? And DK says, the automatic response of dense physical matter to substance, always realizing that substance or substance is force. So substance in this case is the etheric energies or patterns. All right. And then number 2, the dangers incident to working with the fires or with the pranas of the universe. We have the latent fire of the dense physical plane. We have the radiant fire, active fire of the etheric plane. The latter danger is that with which Rule 14 concerns itself. If we're talking about the pranas of the universe, we're talking about etheric energies. Okay, there are many ways in which this rule can be interpreted. We can study the work of the solar angel as he approaches the dense physical plane to take incarnation and thus arrives at that critical point in his creative work, wherein the threefold sheath is at the stage where it must inevitably and unavoidably make contact with the matter aspect. And it is composed thus far of mental, astral, and etheric substance. It must make contact with, strictly speaking, the matter aspect can be considered the lower 3 subplanes of the systemic physical plane, but in a way the entire cosmic physical plane consists of what we would call the matter aspect, and we really don't know. It has not been given what is the substance of the cosmic planes and how does that substance appear? Is it atomic in some way? Well, that's not something we're going to solve immediately. Okay, it is the stage during which expressing this truth in occult terms, it is literally called upon to clothe itself and disappear into the light of day. Now, normally you consider the light of day, it's kind of a scorpionic light. You consider it revelatory. You don't consider it a means of concealment. But in this particular case, the subtle sheath is concealed by what we call the light of day. The spiritual man is now veiled by a mental, or by a fire sheath. All right, these are good descriptions. And this is another way of looking at it. Not only is the subtle form of the thought to be manifested veiled by the light of day of the dense physical plane, namely the gaseous, watery, and dense aspect. But the spiritual man, the solar angel, if we're talking about the solar angel taking a form, is veiled by the triple personality, by a mental or fire sheath. He is clothed in a watery mist, which is the ancient way of referring to the great illusion. And notice the word illusion is used here in connection with the astral plane. The term is used in connection with the astral plane, though usually applied to the mental plane. So this term conveys not only the concept of the possession of an astral or watery body, but also presents to the mind the effect which that body has upon the hidden solar angel. The latter looks out through the fire and through the mist and sees distortion and reflection. He sees that which must mislead. So certainly this description applies to the solar angel or angel of the presence taking form within the personality, or generating a personality as a sheath, a means of expression on the lower 18 subplanes. Now, besides the sheath of fire and the sheath of mist, he has clothed upon himself an outer web of closely interlocking streams of force. This is going to be the way of describing the etheric envelope, which is already very close now to the densest aspect of the form, the lower three subplanes of the systemic physical plane. So, besides the sheath of fire and the sheath of mist, he has clothed upon himself an outer web of closely interlocking streams of force. These constitute his etheric or vital body, which is in the nature of a web or mesh of energy nadis, which in their tens of thousands are woven together and form in certain localities of this energy body various focal points of force, of which the most important are the 7 chakras. I guess we would have to say the 7 major chakras, because we'll be dealing in this web or mesh with centers which are major, minor, and minute. There are, however, as DK says, many such focal points. When this clothing has been assumed by the solar angel, a final stage is reached, and solar fire and fire by friction must be brought into contact with the 3 most ancient fires. They pertain really more to the previous solar system than to this one. And we do have the solar angel affecting the pineal gland, and I suppose another affects the heart. Really, the first effect is etheric, but it is definitely effective in relation to its points of anchorage within the dense physical body. And as far as the structure of a solar angel goes, it does have a heart and a head, and fires emanate from those anatomical structures in this great deva. As far as what the anatomy or structure really is in detail, we're not given to know, but it is at least hinted that there is a heart, there is a head in this being, and from the anatomical points in the solar angel, energies do go forth and enter the man, not only on the mental plane, but they descend further and actually have an anchorage in the etheric body, and I guess are effective in relation to the densest vehicle. Okay, so the solar angel and fire by friction must be brought into contact with the 3 most ancient fires. And note, it's very interesting that he discriminates fire by friction from the 3 most ancient fires? Are they not as well fire by friction? Let's see if that question is answered. These are the fires of the dense physical objective matter, because there are matters of other kinds, matter layers, as we know of other kinds, and etheric matter is described, and the astral atom, its shape is somewhat described, and so, all the way up, the planes, the subplanes of the cosmic physical plane are material in ever more refined degree as we ascend. So these are the fires of the dense physical objective matter, or of those material energy units which we normally cover by the words gaseous, liquid, and dense, a meaningless phrase and only of use to us through its teaching of differentiation. So all of these structures are really energies. They're really fires. Fire, in a way, is energy, and energy is that which moves itself and moves other energy units and has degrees of power. These three ancient fires are an aspect, yes, of fire by friction. So this is here answered, and we need not entirely differentiate fire by friction from the three ancient or three most ancient fires. Okay, differentiate, there it is. Right, so the answer is given. Okay, solar fire and fire by friction must be brought in touch with the most ancient fires, but the three most ancient fires are an aspect of fire by friction. We're only really given at this time three categories of fire, but we do have to remember that there are possibly layers of matter which are still more crude than our lowest form of matter. And you kind of wonder, do these very lowest layers have something to do with that sphere of retention we call the eighth sphere? There are a number of ways of looking at this. Sub-frictional fires, perhaps, or a way in which the dense, the concrete mind becomes a sphere of its own, which DK tells us is a great disaster should it happen. Okay, at this point is the hour of danger for the soul courageous. And what is he telling us? Really, if you want to be a white magician, you have to be a courageous soul. There are many unexpected dangers for at least unexpected by the materially minded individual, and one has to face these occult dangers by well-learned and practiced occult methods. And DK also hints at the idea that many magicians have died in the process of being magicians because they have somehow missed the ability to deal effectively with the dangers confronting them. Excuse me. It is the hour wherein the soul must bring into at one moment the etheric body and the gaseous envelope, which is the highest aspect of the dense physical sheath, the instrument of tangible, organic manifestation. The word organic is interesting. In modern chemistry, we seem to differentiate, maybe falsely, between inorganic chemistry and organic chemistry. And what actually is the differentiation there? The presence of certain types of molecules that are found within living vehicles, living bodies that are not found within normal matter that is not built into a biologically living vehicle. But anyway, let's take a look at this. What makes it the hour of danger? It's going to be, fires of some kind, and the fires may be out of control. Right now, here it is, 2018, the day after Armistice Day, 100 years after the conclusion, through an armistice, of the war to end all wars, as they called it and thought it was, the First World War. And it's a day where fires are burning out of control in the state of California. DK kind of said there would be great cataclysms in the next 1,000 years, and various scriptures have pointed out to dangers by fire. And we're also told that while the Atlantean civilization was destroyed by water, the attempt will be made to destroy the Aryan civilization by fire. There was that atomic fire. Are fires burning out of control in various areas of the world considered aspects of this attempt? Certainly there are people out there with such a disregard for the beauty of our planet and the destiny of humanity that they're setting these very destructive fires purposefully, and causing the loss of life and billions of dollars in property damage. Well, this is a fiery time due to the elements being out of balance, and this has everything to do with how humanity thinks and how they treat each other, the members of humanity, how they treat each other and the other kingdoms. We live in a time of ecological crisis. So, death by fire is possible on the large scale, and now we're talking about danger to the individual magician. Okay, so I'm going to just things, the Master Moria talks about the conflagration of the centers. That's not what we want. We don't want them to ignite and destroy aspects of the etheric body that have to be rebuilt over a long period of time and with much patience and over a number of lives. The magician, using the seventh ray, using Saturn, using Uranus, the magician must control the forces with which he must perforce deal. And there will come the entry of still higher and greater forces, and while he may not be able to control them at the source, he certainly has to control their effect upon him. And this requires a great deal of what we normally call self-control. an individual who is not mentally focused and whose will is weak cannot enter the magical process, or he'll simply be consumed by one or other of the dangers which await the careless magician. We have to remember that during the Aquarian age, when these hidden energies, now hidden at least, become more and more familiar to us, and we must meet them in the right manner. Okay. So there can be a conflagration where the fires of the etheric body meet the fires of the gaseous envelope, and the ignition of fires which burn out of control will frustrate the whole process, bring danger to the magician, and maybe death in that incarnation. We've heard of this sort of amazing phenomena which so many people write off as a hoax, but it's called spontaneous human combustion. And sometimes you see the remains of a person who has suddenly just burst into flames and been almost entirely consumed by fire, with maybe a little non-consumed matter remaining in its proper form to show that indeed something very occult and unusual has happened here. The Aryan age is an age in which we really have to learn the control of fire and its proper direction. The big problem now, of course, is the premature unleashing of atomic energy, which was not intended somehow until the end of, or the beginning of the age of Capricorn, the end of the age of Aquarius. And that has caused the hierarchy to go through a number of revisions of their plans, including taking the fifth ray ashram out of its full power from 1950 to the year 2000. At least those are the figures which I've been able to gather from what DK has written. So we're definitely entering an age of great promise, but also of potential hazard if we are careless. And reading these stories about the process of the magician, I think we are inclined to become more careful. Okay, so that was all this was study of the intended manifestation of a solar angel manifesting as a human personality. We can also study this rule, he says, from the point of view of the initiate, who is occupied with the wielding of forces and who, through the power of his thought, may have created a thought form. So this would be the more conventional interpretation of the white magician operating as a creator. I kind of wonder even about the successful bringing to term of a human pregnancy, and whether there might not be certain stages in the process where this the inner man under formulation, and it can take a long time, maybe even years of appropriation of the vehicles, meets the ancient fires. The inner man meets the ancient fires, and you wonder, is this the reason for some of these miscarriages that occur because of inner occult happenings which have become too intense for the intended form to bear. Anyway, more on this will be forthcoming, I'm sure. So now we're looking at the initiate, who is the magician, and he's trying to create a thought form, which through a magical process will be manifested and which will do its work. The thought form he has clothed with an astral or desire sheath, this thought form, deliberately vitalized with his energy, and I suppose that's etheric. It certainly has been well conceived and hopefully in line with the soul intent and thus in line with the plan. And now the magician here seeks to give it objective existence and send it forth to accomplish its purpose and his intent. So that's the condition of the thought form at the moment. See, we all are creating thought forms, and we try to bring them into manifestation, but we use very ordinary methods. We use our hands and our feet. We use our mind. If you look at an artist, a sculptor, there are tools that are being used to bring the idea into manifestation, but a truly competent and advanced magician could make the form to be manifested so vivid, so powerful, that it would gather the appropriate matter to itself, and without hands or feet or the usual use of tools, the more material methods, that thought form would appear. That would be equivalent to what the sculptor could produce, and depending upon the power of visualization, maybe even more exact. The crucial moment, says the Tibetan, in all creative work is ever to be found at this stage. It is the stage wherein the vibrant subjective form has to attract to itself the material which will give it organization upon the physical plane. This is going to be, an important section for what we normally call the results of magic, appear or disappear. Magicians are known for their ability to make things appear out of nowhere, apparently, and disappear into nowhere, apparently. But there's laws involved with these appearances and disappearances. This fact has to be remembered no matter what the magician is seeking to render objective. It refers equally to an organization, to a group, or to a society. It may refer to the materialization of money, or to the clothing or exteriorization of an idea. This attracting to itself by the vibrant subjective form of the material which will give it organization upon the physical plane. So there are a number of different factors to which it will refer. This rendering of an inner, highly motivated thought objective. The moment of danger to the magician comes at this final stage, although, elsewhere he's talked about some additional dangers like suffocation from thought forms, and or another one having more to do with the astral plane is the draining of astral matter by the Agnisurians, leaving a great gap between the matter of the lower mental plane and the etheric physical levels. That hiatus, that gap, cannot be allowed, and will lead to the death of the magician for that incarnation. So an organization, a group, a society, a materialization of money, clothing or exteriorizing an idea, the moment of danger to the magician comes at this final stage. A point of fine discrimination is reached, and the magician has to proceed now with caution. Okay. Many good plans failed to materialize, and the reason lies right here. A plan is, after all, an idea let loose in time and space to seek a form and do its work. All right, here's a good definition of what an idea is, or what a plan is anyway, rather. Okay. A plan is, after all, an idea let loose in time and space to seek a form and do its work. Interesting, isn't it, when you think of an idea seeking a form? But an idea is formless from the perspective of the dense physical planes, and a dense, well, I'm talking about the lower 18 subplanes. It needs clothing in order to manifest on those 18 lower subplanes, or even the 21 lower subplanes, if we look at the causal body as also a form for an idea. Many of these plans, they come to naught because their creator, or the creative mind from which they emanate, understands not this critical period. Okay. A right adjustment of forces has here to be arranged so that neither too much energy is used in the work nor too little. It seems to be, in a way, a Libran third ray moment of balancing forces for objectification. When too much energy is released through the medium of the vital body, then a fire blazes forth. When the gaseous energy of the dense physical plane is brought in contact with the vital etheric energy, and thus the embryo form is destroyed. Okay. Well, we begin to understand, when dealing with the will, why the first ray, Lord, should be called the power which touches and then withdraws. Only so much energy is allowed, and it has to be highly calibrated. Now, can we have control over this? Control also over the degree of enthusiasm with which we approach the objectification process. You can see how practiced this process must become if it's going to be successful. Okay, where there is not sufficient energy or adequate persistent attention, and when the thought of the magician wavers, then the idea comes to naught. Then the infant is stillborn, literally that, and nothing comes into objective manifestation. So here is the occult partial explanation of that condition, so unhappy in the life of prospective parents of having the child stillborn. There's not sufficient energy. The Creator did not pay adequate attention to the process. And the thought of the Creator wavered and was not sufficiently consistent in the application of the necessary energy. So, and then he tells us about this. This has a literal correspondence on the physical plane. Many infants are stillborn for this very reason, that the solar angel wavers in his intent and is not sufficiently interested. Well, this shows the factor of interest is even operating on the level of a solar angel, and probably in the case of greater creators as well. If you take your eye off the project, disintegration sets in. I personally have experienced this many times and maybe learned a little in the process. So many infants are stillborn for this very reason, that the solar angel wavers in his intent, and maybe assessing the parents and the environment and so forth, develops an attitude which is not sufficiently interested to follow through with the kind of steady application of energy which is needed to sustain the form. Many fine ideas equally fail to materialize or have no persistent living existence in the light of day. I mean, in the dense 3 lower subplanes from one perspective, or from another perspective, the lower 18 subplanes, because there was not sufficient energy to generate the spark of living flame, which must ever burn at the center of all forms. And I think he's giving us a real occult explanation here. A certain degree of intensity is required to generate this living flame, and also this has to do with a point of tension, sustaining a point of tension at a certain elevation and not allowing it to waver, or it will descend into a lesser condition and perhaps a lesser point of tension. So we're looking here at why failure occurs in the process of materialization or objectification. And the hints should be enough to help us in the process so that we do not suffer from an aborted project, that aborting being because of our own attitude towards that which is to materialize. Many fine ideas equally fail to materialize or have no persistent living existence in the light of day, because there was not sufficient energy to generate that spark of living flame which must ever burn at the center of all forms. Well, this is a very practical matter, and we find that we have to control the energy flow so that we avoid these dangers. So the danger, therefore, is twofold. Number one, that of destruction by fire, owing to the expenditure of too much energy and the expression of too violent a purpose. We've all seen people who are like this. Let's just say people who are so intense that what they propose to manifest is overcome and rendered ineffective by their intensity. All right, that is the overkill option. and the second is that of death, inanation, I guess, through lack of vitality, and because the directed attention of the magician is not of adequate strength and duration to bring the form into being. There's an unsteady application of interest. The occult law holds good that energy follows thought, and if we take our thought away from that which we are proposing to create, the energy also will be taken away and will not sustain the presence and the growth of that which we intend to manifest. So we have to learn how, eventually both to let go of our form at a certain point, the form we have created, and as well stay in touch with it so that it benefits from the flow of our energy. This reminds me of what Master Moria said about leadership, that a leader must be neither too close nor too far. If he's too close to that which he is creating, and those who are involved in that creation, then they will begin to take his presence for granted, and he will be minimized. If he's too far, then those who are tending the thought form will forget about him, and he will have no effect. So somehow this Libran balance is really required. Libra is a sign that is much related to the magical process and has to be applied to keep things in balance. There were some humorous cartoons over the last decades, and the Mickey Mouse cartoon about the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Well, things just got out of control. And by every effort to stop the flooding of the whole area by the multiplying brooms carrying water, he made matters worse because he simply multiplied their presence. So, as they say in Harry Potter, terrible thing, she got her spells mixed, and the result was very unfortunate. Now, we could study this rule from the standpoint of the aspirant, as he learns to work with energy and with the forces of nature, as he learns the significance of the purpose of the vital body and gains power in the control of the vital fires or pranas of his own little system. And maybe, in a way that's the most practical for us. We can learn much from the other studies, but we are not the solar angel in full capacity. Our degree of evolution is not equivalent to that of a solar angel, and we are not the highly accomplished white magician who is an initiate of high degree. We are the aspirant, and we're learning to work with energy and the forces of nature. It seems to me that for our particular purpose, says the Tibetan, this line of approach would be of the most use, after all, suggesting to us exactly what we can do to improve the situation. These instructions are intended for those who are definitely interested in the way of liberation from form and who are seeking to prepare themselves to work in cooperation with the Great White Lodge. Well, there's a great statement of purpose as to why we're doing this and what the studies may bring to us. And if we are interested in the ways of liberation from form, it will also lead to an apprehension, to an understanding of how to control form rightly for the sake of manifesting an aspect of the divine plan which we can handle. They are learning the first steps in the magical work, and for them, therefore, An understanding of the fires and of the energies with which they must work is of prime importance. I guess we just really need humility, don't we? I mean, when it comes to occultism, we are, well, are we infants or are we little children? Certainly we're not very developed when it comes to understanding even the first steps. They are learning the first steps in the magical work, and for them, therefore, an understanding of the fires and of the energies with which they must work, is of prime importance. We will therefore confine our attention to this phase of the great work and consider neither the work of the soul as it takes incarnation, although, at some point it really has to be considered. And I think that in Esoteric Psychology 2, under the process of appropriation, he's taken these ideas further in terms of the manifestation of the soul through the personality. Okay, so we will therefore confine our attention to this phase of the great work and consider neither the work of the soul as it takes incarnation and manifests objectively through a form, nor with the work of the initiates as they act as creative magicians under the group impulse and through an intelligent understanding of the evolutionary plan. In other words, I hit something. Let's just say that evolutionary plan, right? So, I really did hit something, and we can't have that. So we'll go back and find a bracket. This is important to do. All right. We have to distinguish the commentary from what Master DK says. So this is the work of the spiritual hierarchy and of high initiates. These instructions are intended to be practical. It's so interesting to write this book after the Cosmic Fire book. He wrote the Cosmic Fire book basically for initiates, or at least those of the third degree, and now here he is in the subsequent book writing for students where they stand. These instructions are intended to be practical and to convey the teaching needed to those students who can read between the lines. Hopefully we have some of that ability, and who are developing the capacity to see the esoteric meaning behind the outer lines and exoteric forms. So let's just say that some subtlety of thinking and apprehension is needed by the reader of this of this book, if there is to be success and understanding. We are now going to consider then the pranas, and I would here quote some paragraphs from The Light of the Soul, which give a description of these pranas. We find in Book 2, Sutra 39, that there are 5 aspects of prana, functioning through and therefore constituting the total etheric or vital body. These are pranas, which energize various layers. Layers of the etheric body. Prana is fivefold in its manifestations, thus corresponding to the 5 states of mind and to the 5 modifications of the thinking principle. Now, what are these 5 states of mind? I wonder how we can look at them. Maybe concrete mind, son of mind, abstract mind, transcendental mind or intuition, and finally, although maybe it's hard to describe it, it's a Buddha-like state of mind. We call it nirvanic mind, and it pertains to the atmic plane. Probably our understanding of that particular state is the least. But then again, that level, the atmic level, is a mental level, after all. It is, excuse me, the 3rd subplane from the top of the cosmic physical plane, and the 5th from the bottom. Top and bottom, we're just talking about differences in vibratory frequency. So those numbers 3 and 5 are particularly the mental numbers. And it is the place where Brahma for the cosmic physical plane originates, and the 5 lower subplanes are considered the Brahmic planes ruled by the great Lord Brahma, however many guises we may find him in. So this nirvanic mind, Buddha mind, of course, in a way, the Buddha's mind went far beyond that because he received that cosmic touch of the cosmic mental plane, and we don't know at what level the touch was made. Was it made at the 4th cosmic level of the mind, or did he somehow enter the causal body of the solar logos, or the planetary logos, let's say, on the 3rd sublevel of the cosmic mental plane? Those things would be nice to know, and maybe for the coherence of our understanding, but they are not being discussed, and of course anything that we learned about them would be strictly speculative. Now, what I think is that it's going to be best, we're on page 569, and we began here on 563. So I can't go on with this. It's got simply to be an hour program because other duties call, but let's just say right at this point, I'll bring down this, and 563 to 569. Just make sure to get this right, and this is Rule X1V, and ending 14.1. And I don't know in how many parts. I think it's just one part. One part. And beginning with program number 8 in this series about the physical plane rules of magic, we're going to do 14.2 when I can manage that, and starting from page 569. Okay, well, that's where we are. Sometimes I forget something here, and I pick it up a little bit later. Okay, this is actually the end of part 7. See, that was going to be a forgetting right there. And we'll move on, and we have another 60 pages or so to go in the document, and maybe a little bit more in the book itself. Well, I hope, such serious study as the Tibetan demands of us is not the cup of tea of everyone. I think we live in hurried times and we want the presentation of that which is immediately assimilable. But remember, the great second ray deals with information which requires pondering. Ponder on this. Just brood upon it until the light flashes forth. And, finally, the light of the intuition giving us a real straight knowledge and understanding. Okay, thank you, friends. And we'll get into this next. I still have hopes for this evening after our board meeting is finished. All these things having to do with manifestation on the external plane. So, lots of love, many blessings, and we'll see you soon.